What would you do if the sun exploded?
20 years ago, Doctor Who tried to answer this question in Series 1, Episode 2 of the Revival era, also known as New Who, when the show came back on air after a lengthy hiatus in the wilderness, so to speak. This episode, aptly named The End of the World, features an array of alien species, high stakes, and even some Britney Spears' music. So, sit back and relax, but don't sit too close to the sun. Once again, I'm Nathan, or NJ if you prefer, and I'm a big Doctor Who and all things media nerd. But anyways, time to get into the retrospective. Narrative overview and production context. So, episode 2 of Doctor Who's 2005 revival series was penned by showrunner Russell T Davies. Once again, R2D from here on out, he shall be. And The End of the World follows an interesting story where the Doctor asks Rose if she has a specific preference of venturing into the past or future, to which she chooses the latter option. The result of this is the Doctor piloting the TARDIS to the year 5 billion inside a space station orbiting the Earth before he discloses they're specifically visiting Platform 1, the observation deck of the Earth's final day as the sun expands, destroying the planet in its wake. However, amidst this, a sinister plot begins to unfold, in which mysterious metal spider drones begin to meddle with the station's safety mechanisms, raising the stakes and the temperature to unprecedented highs. As the Doctor teams up with Jabe, a representative of the Forest of Cheam, to explore the irregularity surrounding Platform 1, Rose questions the haste in which she embarked onto the TARDIS in the first place, doubting the circumstances she finds herself in. After the defensive shields are lowered by the metal spiders, almost killing Rose in the process, Jabe and the Doctor rush to reactivate Platform 1's defences. However, under the constraints of time, Jabe makes a noble and devastating sacrifice of her life to rescue those on board. Upon returning to the main deck, the Doctor sleuths his way around each suspect before concluding that the Lady Cassandra, the last human, quote unquote, is behind the attack in a bid to profit from the tragedy. However, though her plan gets foiled, she meets her end as the Doctor observes stoically. The episode closes with Rose and the Doctor briefly returning to her contemporary place of living, where the Doctor reveals he is in fact the last of his species, following a war between his and another. Directed by A. Roslin, who has since gone on to direct a number of other marvellous episodes alongside hit television series and films, the bulk of this episode was recorded during the autumn of 2004. What's also really interesting about the production for this episode is the absolute scale and variety of costume and character design for all of the characters of different species alongside the magnificent looking Platform 1, with a key intention behind the production's elaborate nature being to highlight the potential in a Doctor Who for the 21st century. Rest assured, this certainly shined through. The End of the World aired on April the 2nd, 2005, achieving an overall viewing audience of 7.97 million. Pivotal scene. Now, let's get into the pivotal scene analysis for the episode. And without further ado, the pivotal scene for Series 1, Episode 2 is what I'd like to call the designated driver scene. The scene in question entails Rose beginning to query the trustworthiness and honesty of the Doctor. Rose sits away from the Doctor at the beginning as she begins to challenge the Doctor's authenticity and reflect on how the TARDIS translation circuit began to filter her perception of languages, and essentially the TARDIS got in her head and changed things without her permission, and how she's also far away from home without having even considered the ramifications of choosing to leave. The Doctor takes a defensive position on this, shunning her accusations before the room is filled with an air of awkward silence. However, the energy of the room shifts from a rise in tension to a sudden de-escalation as they make amends for their brashness, choosing to instead focus on the reality of their situation. Rose then remarks how she is unable to contact anyone using her phone before the Doctor utilises his technical prowess to modify her mobile phone, allowing her to make contact despite having time travelled. She proceeds to test this by dialing out to her mum, who answers the call much to her bewilderment. Here, Rose begins to understand the implications of this, and that despite her being able to make contact with someone in 2005, her mum is still dead relative to their current whereabouts. The rise and fall in tension throughout the scene, however, is what attributes to so much significance for the episode, as without having resolved Rose's shaky confidence in the Doctor, the risks of matters worsening later when the stakes increased may have become far worse. Alongside this, the scene serves as another important defining moment for their dynamic, building on their relationship as the story progresses. Star of the episode. When it comes to star of the episode for this story, much like episode 1, there's definitely a close call in who to definitively bestow this label to. However, after much deliberation, I have to give this one to Billie Piper as Rose Tyler. There are many reasons behind this, not the least thanks to Billie's incredible acting performance in this story, and how naturally she conveys the mercurial temperament of Rose during her time adjusting and making sense of the predicaments she finds herself in. Further to this, Rose herself as a character is instrumental in this story with how she processes and responds to the sudden change of environment and having to witness the death of planet Earth, someone that has strings and connections to everything in her life that brought meaning before meeting the Doctor. Which certainly puts into perspective how much detachment must come from stepping into a time-travelling blue box only to watch your home planet burn. But we'll save the rest of that for later. Back on the topic of Billie's portrayal of Rose, her use of facial expressions, body language and control of vocal tone really help in amplifying the mental state Rose finds herself in, unsure of who to trust, what to really make of the situation, and how she can help to make a difference. And the use of costuming, in addition, acts as a contrast against both the uniformity of the staff on board, such as Raffaello, and the extravagant clothing donned by the prestigious guests from a time far beyond that really sort of defined 2005 London aesthetic Rose has on display. All in all, through Billie's performance work alongside a detailed and intrinsic creative vision from the production team, coupled with narrative emphasis, Rose definitively takes the spot on this week's star of the episode. In retrospect. So, to take this further, let's take a look at some of the key themes and motifs contained within the story, and how well they carry over to a 2025 lens. Considering this story contains ideas and commentary on a variety of aspects, including a narrative around the beauty industrial complex through the satirical take on early 2000s often extreme beauty standards, and perhaps one of an environmental spin with the ideas around the heat death of a planet from a current day point of view is quite interesting, where global warming has only increased in significance and relevance in current day discourse. However, whilst these aspects are both present, the dominant theme I can take away from this story is one of conflict and loss. Linking back to an earlier segment of the video, we see Rose get whisked away by the mystical Doctor, and the very first outing in the TARDIS takes her to bear witness to losing her own home planet. However, what really sets us apart is how Rose has connections to her own time and place, thanks to her mobile phone, now with a significant upgrade of temporal roaming capabilities. At the very end of this story, the Earth perishes. However, the Doctor takes Rose back to 2005 to remind her how the events they were part of are far away for her, and the Earth she knows, with all those she cares about, is still very much in existence. This is in direct contrast to the Doctor's situation of his home planet being destroyed in war, unable to ever return. Rose seeks to comfort the Doctor somewhat by changing the subject, but this theme of conflict and loss absolutely resonates, perhaps more than at the time of the release, with the modern day as conflicts and global tragedies have increased in recent years. With that, The End of the World in retrospect certainly holds up better than expected as a thought provoking and well crafted narrative. So, all in all, an exciting episode with plenty of serious and some silly moments. And thanks also for tuning in to this episode 2 of the Doctor Who retrospective series that is currently being worked on. If you made it this far, please feel free to like, subscribe, or comment your thoughts on this particular story. Anyway, thanks again and have a fantastic rest of your day. I hope to see you in the next episode.